Well, good afternoon to all of my brothers and sisters. It would be great to be able to do this in person with you all, but I think probably half of a planet separates us from one another. So we'll have to make do with an electronic greeting. I thank you for the opportunity to speak to you tonight, and I hope that what we have to say will be encouraging. You know, not only in the Philippines, but also in the country where I live, in America, and in 180 more countries around the world, people are suffering. People are dying. People are troubled. And the future seems uncertain. And into that time of uncertainty, I thought it might be helpful to take a look at some of the things that the scriptures have to say about fear. One of my favorite passages in the Gospel of Mark is this one section where Jesus has just fed 5,000 people miraculously. And he's about to send his disciples in a boat to the other side of the lake. And when he gets to the other side of the lake, he's going to again miraculously feed a large group of people, 4,000 that time. But in between those two miracles, there's something that happens that I think is very instructive for us. You see, the Gospel of Mark has one major concern, and that is to convince people that are reading the story that Jesus is the Son of God. And so all through the book, Mark will have the people in the stories ask this question, who is Jesus? And then they will offer their own response to it. So for example, you'll have King Herod wondering if Jesus is the resurrected John the Baptist, whom he has had beheaded. You'll have other people in the story. You'll have some that say, who is this? Don't we know his mother and his father and his brothers and his sisters? Isn't his father a carpenter? They suppose that they know who Jesus is because they watched him grow up. But it's painfully obvious that they do not know who Jesus is in the story. And even some of the closer disciples have difficulty with this question that Mark poses for us. Who is Jesus? But in this particular story, in between these two miraculous feedings, we have an answer. And I think it's instructive for us today as we look at what's going on around us, and the uncertainty of the climate, the world around us. So let's go back to Mark chapter 6. Jesus has fed 5,000 people miraculously. His disciples are dumbfounded. They don't know what to make of this. But Jesus sends them on ahead in a boat while he dismisses the crowd, the text says. And having dismissed the crowd, he goes to pray. He prays for a long time because it's already night by the time he gets through. And to meet his disciples on the other side of the lake, he decides to walk across the water to the other side. The disciples in the boat see him, and they don't know who he is. They don't know who Jesus is. And that's part of Mark's point. The disciples, even the ones closest to him, don't know who he is. It says they thought he was a ghost. And so they cry out. And Jesus immediately says, and this is crucial, Jesus says to them, take courage. Do not be afraid. It is I. Take courage. Do not be afraid. It is I. Now, when you think about the Son of God saying that to those disciples then, and calming their fears, and giving them courage, it's not a very far stretch to imagine Jesus looking into our eyes and saying those things, saying things about the crisis that we find ourselves in now. When Jesus is in charge, when Jesus is in control, there's nothing to fear. It's interesting to me that around the world we have people trying to assess blame for the situation now. It's a very human characteristic, but we all want to know whose fault it is, who let this virus free, who proliferated the virus, whose fault is it that we didn't get this handled sooner. Everybody wants to know whose fault this is. And when you look at the scriptures, when others have asked God, whose fault is this? Whose fault is that? The answers are not the direct kind that we would assume for or hope for. When Job asks God, why do all these bad things happen to me? The Lord does not offer him a simple answer. In fact, he responds by asking Job questions of his own, but he doesn't answer him directly. And likewise, in the New Testament, when Jesus is asked by his disciples about this Tower of Siloam and how it fell and killed people, whose fault was that? They want to know. Again, no direct answer. And again, when the disciples see a blind man on the road, they say, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? And in typical fashion, in both of these instances, Jesus does not give them a direct response. What he does is he turns the question around and makes a point. That's a valid point for us today, too. When the disciples asked him, whose fault was it that this tower fell and killed these people? Jesus basically turns the question around and he asks them, if the tower had fallen on you, would you have been ready? How is that instructive for the church today in the situation in which we find ourselves? One way, I think, is that rather than trying to assess blame or try to decide whose fault it is that this virus has been unleashed on the world, or whose responsibility it is that it's not been contained more quickly or more completely, rather than waste our time trying to assign blame, let the church be the hands and the feet and the arms of Jesus and try to alleviate the suffering that we see that is in the world. Because suffering is surely going to be here, either through this virus or through something else. It's not really helpful to determine whose fault it is, who is responsible. But it would be instructive for the church to be seen by the world as ministering to those that are in pain. I suspect that where you are, the devastation is much closer to home than in many places. I know that there's been many people distraught and affected by this there in the Philippines. We've watched the news closely. And while I wish that I could be there to be the hands and the feet and the arms of Jesus, all I can do from here is pray and support the work that you are doing there. And so we do. We pray for you, for those that are suffering, for those that are dying from this horrible malady. And yet we don't lose heart. Take courage. Do not be afraid. It is I. The Son of God tells us to take courage and to not be afraid. In fact, the whole theme of not being afraid is so common in the Bible that it is stated over 360 times by one count in the Bible. Just think of 2 Timothy 1 verse 7, when it says, God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. Or 1 Peter 5, verses 6 and 7, where Peter says, "Humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God, that he may exalt you at the proper time, casting all your fears on him, because he cares for you." So we have a reason for casting our fears and our anxieties on him, because we know that he cares for us. He actually cares about what happens to individual you and me, as amazing as that might be. He says a little bit later in that same letter, Peter, he says, "Who is there to harm you if you prove zealous for what is good?" So as we go about the world doing good and trying to alleviate the suffering around us, we have no fear of anything happening to us. And even if you should suffer, he goes on to say, for the sake of righteousness, you are blessed. And then he says this, "Do not fear what they fear, and do not be troubled." What is the world around us? Fear? What are they afraid of? Well, ultimately, they're afraid of dying, because without Christ, they have no hope. But they're also afraid of losing their homes or losing their jobs, or those things are to be feared. They're to be feared greatly. But you can't fear them with the same fear that you would fear them without hope, or without faith, without trust, knowing that God will provide for you. Hebrews says that we're to make sure that our character is free from the love of money, and to be content with what we have. For he himself has said, "I will never desert you. I will never forsake you." So we can confidently say, "The Lord is my helper. I will not be afraid. What will man do to me?" If the Lord is on your side, then there's no need to worry. Does that mean you don't try to put food on the table? Does that mean you don't try to find solutions to the problems that you and others face? No. But it means we don't despair. We are not filled with fear and with grief, because we trust God. We believe that God will provide. Do not worry about tomorrow, Jesus said, for tomorrow will take care for itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. Of course, we all remember Psalms 23. "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me." If the Lord is with us, who can be against us? Or in the words of the psalmist, "The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the defense of my life. Whom shall I dread?" If you are secure in the knowledge of your relationship with God, you have nothing to fear. Not even death. Not deprivation. Not homelessness. Nothing. It's a hard lesson to internalize. And I suppose all of us could reach a greater level of maturity in recognizing it. But that is, in fact, what the scriptures teach us. As Jesus told the disciples as he was walking across the water while they're sitting in the boat, he said, "Take courage. Do not fear. It is I." Let's leave that thought with one another tonight and see if we can find the strength to work through our fear and try to help those around us that may not know the Lord, that may not have the hope or the confidence that we have, and to try to do what we can to alleviate suffering in the world around us.